All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing a perennial ranked matchup, the Red River Showdown between Oklahoma and Texas. 5.5 line in favor of the Horns, coming off a win over Alabama just a couple weeks ago. Cotton Bowl Stadium in Dallas, 12 p.m. Eastern time on ABC. You know, Nick, growing up, this has always been my favorite rivalry in college football, and it still is. I just know as a kid, year after year, there would always be so much on the line. These games are always close. Last year, quarterback issues, they didn't have one for Oklahoma, so it wasn't a close contest. But before that, I think it was like 7 or 8 years in a row, this was a one-score game. And again, there's always so much on the line, more than just bragging rights. You know, what does this one mean to you?
This is a pretty important rivalry. Obviously playing in a neutral site is controversial to some people, but I think that them and the matchup in Jacksonville between Georgia and Florida, the two games that should be allowed to have a neutral site. I think playing it at the Cotton Bowl is just perfect. It's the perfect stadium for it. There's no need to move it. I think it just makes perfect sense playing it in the Cotton Bowl. It's such a great rivalry, these two programs, two historic college football programs that stand for a lot, and especially in the 2000s. They've had some great matchups over the years. Can't forget the 2008 matchup when the Big 12 South had Texas Tech in the hunt as well for national championship. Oklahoma was in their number 1 team. Texas was number 5 team. They came in 45-35. Texas knocked them off in 08 behind Colt McCoy to go on and be a great team. Then the year later, Texas knocked them off 16-13 before they went on to the national championship game and lost to Alabama. The trophy is great with the golden hat, all the festivities around the game. It's fantastic, just a fantastic, good old-fashioned rivalry, and I really do love watching it. I cannot wait for this one at noon on Saturday.
Now, looking at this Oklahoma offense, Dillon Gabriel is really taking on that next step this year. I think this is his 5th year in college football. 75% completion rate, 15 touchdowns, 2 picks, 3 straight 300-yard games. This passing attack, much different than it was a season ago. And maybe I was wrong. At least, they've impressed at wide receiver. I wasn't exactly thrilled with some of the talent they had. Andre Anthony, transferring in, 22 grabs for 387, over 17.5 yards per catch. Jalil Farouk showcasing some of his speed, 285 yards. Freshman Nick Anderson's been a very pleasant surprise. Team high 5 touchdowns, 28 yards per catch. He's been phenomenal. And of course, Drake Stoops is a reliable slot weapon for them. They've certainly had some of these guys like Anderson and Anthony step up, Nick, which is very important for this passing attack, which has certainly caught me by surprise a little bit.
This is a pretty good passing attack so far. Dillon Gabriel has kind of come into his own here. Obviously, he battled injuries at UCF, and now he comes over to Oklahoma. Looked shaky at times last year, battled injuries last year. Now he seems to be locked in and good to go. Nearly 1,600 yards passing so far this season, 75.2% completion percentage, 15 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Gabriel's locked in. He looks comfortable in the pocket. Very solid pocket passer. Can also make moves he needs to with his feet. Anthony has been a fantastic add for this team, 387, 17.6 yards per catch, and the score for him. Farouk, we thought he was going to be the number 1 guy this year. He's having a pretty good season so far at 285 and 2 scores. Anderson has come out of nowhere with a 279 yards receiving, 27 yards per catch, plus the 5 scores. Then Drake Stoops, like you said, son, of course, of former head coach Bob Stoops, is a very reliable slot weapon. 4 touchdowns for him, 200 yards. I like Stoops a lot. He's my favorite player on this team. I think he's a good, hardworking kid that puts the effort in. This is a very solid receiving core. That's a really solid offense that can definitely put points up on you.
47 points per game. They only had 20 on the road against Cincinnati. They certainly left a lot on the table in that one. Biggest concern here is, Jeff Lebby's offense wants to move fast. The best way to do that is run the football. 128th nationally with 20-plus yard rushes. Only one of those. They have no explosiveness in this rushing attack, and it's not from a lack of trying. They had 41 attempts against Iowa State, 34 against Cincinnati, 47 and 49 in the first 2 games of the year. This is just not an explosive rushing attack, under 4 yards per carry this season, and they've not been playing the greatest of opponents. I mean, Cincinnati had a good D-line, but other than that, they should certainly be doing a lot better than they are. And we kind of, we criticize this running back room for not being the most talented. We said Javonte Barnes, he was probably a solid one. Marcus Majors has been around a long time, but Barnes, he's 3rd on the team in rushing, hasn't really been seeing the field much. I think he's a little banged up. Not sure what his status is moving forward. So it's up to Major and Tyree Walker, it looks like. And these guys have just not really been that great. The offensive line, they've been good in pass protection, but in terms of springing long, explosive rushing plays, Nick, it's been non-existent, which, is a far cry from last year when they had Eric Gray, who had almost 1,400 yards. This rushing attack, which is not good this year, and I think that might be their downfall this season.
It certainly is an issue for this offense. Their rushing attack is just not there. Like I said, 157 5.6 yards per game on the ground this year. It's just not great enough. Marcus Major, about 200 yards on the ground, 1 score for him. Tway Walker has about 200 yards as well. He's got 5.1 yards per carry, 2 scores. Dylan Gabriel is nearly 100 yards on the ground and 4 scores. I touched on his ability to move on the ground, but they've really struggled to find any sort of rhythm on the ground. Like you said, about averaging 4 yards per carry this season. It's just not a good enough number for this Oklahoma team. This offense needs to have that sort of balance under Jeff Lebby. You want to be able to get that good, quick balance and hit your defenses, opponent defenses in a couple different ways. Without that sort of pace on offense on the ground, you're really struggling to kill that clock and struggling to be involved and get that fast-paced offense. It's something they have to certainly work on. They're going to have a tough time running against Texas here, who was really good against the run against Alabama and some other teams so far this season. So I certainly think it's not going to be a great week on the ground for Oklahoma.
Now, Troy Everett, Walter Rouse, they lead a pretty impressive left side on the O-line. They've been really stout in pass protection this year. Andrew Ram's a nice communicator there, a veteran at center. This offensive line has a major test against a really impressive Texas front, like you said, Nick. Do you think they can win this game being one-dimensional, given if the pass protection is, consistent with how it's been this season?
If they're going to win this game, they're going to have to find a way to dominate on the ground as well. I think they cannot win this game being one-dimensional. It's just not going to work. Like, this Texas front seven is very good. We're going to get to them a little bit later, but they're a very dominant front seven that's going to make Dylan Gabriel uncomfortable in the pocket and cause him to make mistakes, kind of similar to what they did to Alabama where they made Jalen Milroe make mistakes. I think this is what's going to happen here for Texas and Oklahoma. I just don't think you can win this game unless you can hit Texas on the ground and gut punch them.
Now, looking at the Texas offense, this is a unit that has plenty of talent. Quinn Ewers really showcasing that maturity this season. 1,358 yards, 10 touchdowns. He had that pick against Kansas that wasn't all that great. And this team has a problem, it seems, with scoring. He only had 37 against Rice, had 458 yards in that one. Same with Wyoming, only 31 points. 661 yards of offense, 300-plus rushing and passing against Kansas. They only had 40 points. Nick, they only had 13, I think it was in that first half. They really struggled to find the end zone. And that's just a problem with Texas, it seems, is they can't really execute when they get past the 50. Against Alabama, that really wasn't a problem. They put up 454 in that one, really showcasing this deep passing attack. That's really the only flaw with Texas, because they have plenty of weapons. A.D. Mitchell's really stepped up. Jatavian Sanders, he exited that game early against Kansas. His, we'll see what his status is. They have plenty of other guys that can step up. Jordan Whittington hasn't been great with production. Neither is Jonte Cook, but these are guys I think they can lean on, and they'd feel confident in if they had to. Xavier Worthy, of course, plenty of vertical speed, only about 13 yards per catch this season. I certainly want to see those numbers tick up as the season goes on. More big passing plays from Texas. But they have great balance, and they're able to push the ball downfield, though, Nick.
The lack of scoring is certainly a problem for me. It does concern me, but the balance is fantastic. 286 through the air per game, 191 on the ground per game, 478 total yards of offense per game. I think that's a very nice balance for this. Quinn Ewers has come into his own. He's kind of changed his image and changed his whole personality. It seems he's very much locked in. I'm very proud of what he's done. He looks great. I think he's really living up to that expectation and hype that he had coming out of high school. 66% completion percentage, 1,350 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, the 1 interception against Kansas, which was a pretty bad interception. But overall, he's been really composed in the pocket, looked comfortable. You kind of know what you're going to get with him. Xavier Worthy, 13.3 yards per catch is a worrying number for a guy like Worthy who has so much breakout potential. I really thought Worthy was going to hit the ground running this year. I haven't quite seen that yet from him. 3 touchdowns so far. Mitchell 321 and 4 scores. Tavion Sanders 278 and a score so far. Jordan Whittington is a nice physical player with 142 yards receiving, and they have good balance on the ground as well. With Jonathan Brooks nearly 600 yards rushing and 5 scores. I think Brooks is obviously the key here. Can he dominate on the ground against this Oklahoma defense that has looked pretty good against some of their opponents? They weren't coming into the season pegged as a fantastic defense, but they've given up 0 points against Arkansas State, 11 against SMU, 6 against Cincinnati. They are a pretty solid defense. Can Brooks be able to find those holes and break out?
Yeah, Brooks coming off a 217-yard game, 2 scores, 100-plus, and 3 straight for him. Like you said, almost 600 yards. He's really been the lead back for them, along with C.J. Baxter and Jaden Blue. They're incredibly deep in the backfield. Brooks is the one that's been the leader for them and has emerged in that backfield. Christian Jones at right tackle, he's really stepped up for them. That's great. I think they're getting better guard play now that DJ Campbell, former 5-star, has been inserted right there at their right side. And then, of course, they have a nice bookend in Kelvin Banks at left tackle. So the offensive line, this is certainly a unit that's going to continue to get better going against the Oklahoma team that doesn't have the greatest of pass rushes. I think Texas, again, like you said, the biggest concern from them is only 36 points per game. They're leaving a lot on the table. Complimentary run game, though, even against Alabama, they only had like 100 and so yards, but they were certainly averaging enough on those early downs to be very efficient for Texas. So, final thoughts on this offense going in this game, Nick, because I love the balance.
I think this is a very good balanced offense. I want to see Worthy be a bit of more breakout, better downfield for him. He's such a talented wide receiver. We haven't quite seen him be fully opened up yet. I think the playbook has more options for him.
Looking at the Oklahoma defense, allowing less than 11 points per game coming into this one. And this is clearly a different defense. I don't really care who they've played. SMU, that's a pretty good offense. They held up against Cincinnati, held that running game in check for the most part. Iowa State held the 352 yards. Not exactly world beater offenses by any means, but you can tell, when watching these games, there's a complete difference from last year where the defense really was just a big liability. I think they got carved up against TCU the week before this game. Danny Stutzman last year, we talked about, he had over 1,000 plays. He had to play so much because they just didn't have anyone else they could lean on. He's been elite. 49 tackles, 9 TFL, 2 sacks, has a pick 6 as well. This dude has been phenomenal for them. They haven't exactly been great at the other spots at linebacker. Jared Kanek, Kip Lewis, they've been on the field second and third leading tacklers. But they haven't exactly been the type of playmakers that Stutzman is. This is a defense that certainly has improved, and I think this is going to be a big prove-it opportunity for all of them involved. The D-line, Ethan Downs, this is a reliable player for them at defensive end. Rondell Bothroyd in the past has proven to be a good run defender coming over from Wake Forest. Isaiah Coe as well. It's been a by-committee approach to really for this defense. They've been pretty solid against the run, Nick. How do you think this front seven is going to fare in this contest?
This is a front seven I like. Stutzman obviously is leading the way. Like you said, the stats from Stutzman are just fantastic. He is really dominating on this front seven. He's a really talented player. Rondell Bothroyd, waiting for him to break out. He's got 7 total tackles so far. I think he can really get those numbers up. He's a good player coming off that left edge. I really do like what I see out of him. I think he needs to improve a little bit more, though. Ethan Downs, 14 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Good physical guy coming off the right. You have a nice 1-2 punch there off the right and the left. I think those are very solid. Jared Kanek as well as the second leading tackler with 22 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack for him at linebacker. So overall, this front seven has some nice hard-hitting players. I like the way they look so far. I think there are some good physical guys, and they're pretty good against the run as well. They're solid. The 11 points per game given up is a pretty good number so far. I know they've played, some teams you can say what you want to say, but SMU has a pretty good offense. Cincinnati's got a decent offense as well. So this defense is certainly holding their own.
Yeah, you guys like Trace Ford, aforementioned Bothroyd, Jacob Lacey. This is just a by-committee approach. They've really been rotating here on this D-line. It's been interesting to see how it's worked out for them. Certainly need to up their production, only 8 sacks, and the defensive lineman, no one's really broken out just yet. In the secondary, of course, this is a unit that wasn't great for them. I think they're like 114th against the pass. They're also looking much better. Guys like Key Lawrence have stepped up in coverage. Deshaun McCullough, he's back on the field and healthy. He's starting to get into a rhythm of versatile playmaker. They really want to see get on the field a lot more as the season goes on. Woody Washington, one of the veterans who's one of the more talented players who's been great against the run. He's also been a phenomenal tackler for them. Billy Bowman as well. So there's plenty of veterans here that have been around. This is their second year in the system now, and they've been great in the secondary. They already have 10 interceptions. Gentry Williams, another one of those guys who's really stepped up for them. 5 touchdowns allowed compared to those 10 picks. They've allowed 250 yards or less in every single game this season against the pass. Maybe SMU is probably certainly the toughest passing attack they faced. Still not the greatest by any means, though. This is a completely different animal in Texas, Nick. They gave up a lot of completions last year for big yardage. Completion percentage as well was a pretty high number, 62%. That's down to under 55, and I think that's what they want to do, limit efficiency and big plays. And I think, the second year inventable scheme is certainly going to be a big prove-it opportunity here in this game.
Gentry Williams has stepped up big time. He's a sophomore here, played as a true freshman last year, 14 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, plus the 2 picks for him. Williams has been really good in the secondary. I like what I can see out of him so far, playing that left cornerback role. His partner on the right side, Woody Washington's having a good season as well, 17 total tackles, half tackle for loss, plus a pass breakup for him. So I think those two guys together at cornerback are good. They're going to have a tough battle here against guys like Xavier Worthy, but I think Washington and Williams can definitely play some good coverage, play some nice man coverage. These are 2 talented pieces they have in the secondary.
Yeah, certainly want to see how they do against all that speed of Texas. They're certainly going to look to attack you downfield. Looking at the Longhorns defense, this is a unit last year I gave great praise to. Pete Kwiatkowski showing up, doing big things for them. And they're great on the defensive line. Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat has plenty of interior size. Vernon Broughton has also really stepped up around him. Ethan Burke, he was just manhandling Alabama. They have plenty of different guys here to go around. You want to compare front sevens in this game. I think Texas certainly has the much more impressive one. Jalen Ford, we already know how good of a downhill producer he is, but Anthony Hill's been showcasing that as well. He was also a guy that kind of got unleashed against Alabama and made a big impact. 6 tackles, that's a season high for him. He's also been able to get into the backfield a good bit as well. This is a sound run defense, Nick, by very means. All of last year, they didn't give up over 120 yards once. Actually, they didn't give up over 160 once last year. And that's been the case this year. 155 against Wyoming. That certainly isn't great against that opponent, but they were sound against Baylor. They were great against Kansas. Kind of a freak play that led to a touchdown on a fumble that was recovered by Highshaw. He was able to, just get the angle there on that one. But 124 yards rushing for Kansas. Alabama was held in check for 107. This is a great run defense going again against a non-explosive rushing attack. This looks like an opportunity for them to really feast here.
This is certainly an opportunity for them to dominate, considering how weak Oklahoma's running game has been. 94 yards allowed on the ground so far this season, under 100 yards, 196 through the air. This is a very good run defense that has some seriously talented pieces. Ethan Burke, the sophomore on the defensive end, has looked fantastic. He's stepped up big time, 12 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for Burke. Very good player, really talented young player. Devondre Sweat has been really good as well at that left defensive tackle. He's a very talented piece. They have 15 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack for him so far. Jalen Ford at linebacker, very good veteran player, 32 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 picks for him as well. Ford's kind of your do-it-all, sort of move him around. Good senior leadership there. I think he's a fantastic player this team has. Very, very solid there for this team. Alfred Collins as well, looking for him to break out. He's got 6 total tackles. This is a very good defense. This front seven has names upon names upon names. Just a talented group overall.
Yeah, this front seven in the run D has proven themselves. The secondary really hasn't yet. Alabama, they certainly gave up some big plays. They also capitalized on some bad mistakes by a quarterback who certainly was just, giving them opportunities to succeed. They had 2 interceptions in that one. Kansas, Jason Bean, he's a capable quarterback, but he certainly wasn't able to provide the same impact through the air as Jalen Daniels probably would have. Limited them to only 9 completions on 21 attempts. They did allow a big 59-yard touchdown, though. I think it was Jedi Barron. I think on that one. Could be wrong. But this is a secondary that certainly is talented. 6 picks this year compared to 4 touchdowns allowed. Ryan Watts, the guy who came over last year, certainly has impressed for them. Barron, again, he's a versatile player. He's likely going to be a slot weapon for them. Jalen Catalon really reminding people how good he is in this game. There's some guys in this secondary can certainly struggle, though. Guys like Keaton Crawford, Jaron Thompson, and those are the guys that are going to look to attack, I think, against Texas. Oklahoma is looking to prove it in the secondary, but Texas has to as well, Nick, because they've not really faced much of a passing attack this season. Alabama does have plenty of speed, and they certainly were able to expose them at times in that contest. But again, they were gift-wrapped a couple of opportunities. Oklahoma, Dylan Gabriel, not going to be that kind.
Certainly Dylan Gabriel and Oklahoma can attack this secondary. It looks weak at times so far. Guys like Terrence Brooks have really not been involved at all so far this season. Brooks has 1 tackle and 2 pass breakups. He's really not been targeted at all so far this season. Jalen Catalon, he's been having a decent season, 14 total tackles for him. A good veteran player who's got some good experience. Jari Thompson, Ryan Watts. These are all guys that are going to get targets this week. Ryan Watts, 17 total tackles. They're going to have to find a way to target these guys and beat these guys. I think these guys are very talented, but I think they have some weaknesses, and Oklahoma can certainly pick on that considering the size and speed they have.
Yeah, and Terrence Brooks has played plenty of snaps this year. He's not been very productive, hasn't been much of a coverage asset. Again, guys like Brooks, Crawford, Jalen Gabu, those guys are going to be players you want to target in the secondary. So it's going to be a big opportunity to see what they're made of in Catalon as well. Still getting back into the rhythm of things. Maybe you can beat him over top. But overall, there are certainly talented players in the secondary. Malik Muhammad, another player who's been sound this year. We didn't mention Gavin Holmes, a Wake Forest transfer. They're very deep on this side of the ball. I think Texas has done a great job. All the Sark hot seat nonsense last year really upset me because I really do think they did a good job on this side of the ball. It's going to be interesting to see this Texas defense, though, in this one. Looking at the tail of the tape, the team comparisons, top to bottom, I'd say Texas, clean sweep on offense. The D-line's easily better. I'm going to give linebacker the slight edge to Oklahoma for Danny Stutman's performance, but, that's really hard to do because Jalen Ford's great. Anthony Hill, he's still a true freshman, even though I like his talent. So I'm going to give it to Oklahoma, even though neither team's exactly elite in that category. And I'll go ahead and give the secondary to the Sooners as well, but I think Texas, you can make a case for them to have the edge at every single positional group here. Good coaching and scheming is really why Oklahoma is a good football team right now at this moment in time.
I think Oklahoma is a great football team, good coaching so far under Brent Venables. I think this edge is good for these teams, right? I think Oklahoma does have the edge at linebacker and secondary. Texas definitely has it at quarterback, running back, receiver, and both offensive and defensive lines. That Texas defensive line, I don't think there's a single team that'll have a better defensive line and a matchup for them so far this season. I think this is just a fantastic unit for this Texas defensive line. They get after the quarterback, they put a lot of pressure on you.
Now looking at the final thoughts on the prediction, keys to the game for Oklahoma. Find some explosiveness on the ground. Secondary prove-it game for them. Be strong defending the deep ball for Texas. And you got to really find that balance on offense. I'm going to take the Horns to win this game. I think it's going to be close like it always is in this series. Oklahoma, I just don't think that explosive passing or rushing game is going to be there. And with that said, they're still going to put up 34 points. I think there's going to be a couple of opportunities, maybe on special teams, maybe a nice fumble. Something crucial always happens in this game. Score always ends up being a little bit higher than it probably should. I think you're going to see nice defensive plays from both teams. Ultimately, though, I definitely see a little bit of a higher score in this one. Great rivalry as always, Nick. This is going to be a good one.
I love this rivalry. I'm super excited for this game. This rivalry is going to bring itself back to the SEC as well. They're going to join the SEC next year and be together in that rivalry. It's a great neutral site rivalry. I expect a shootout. It tends to be a shootout pretty much every year. It seems like defenses just don't show up in these matchups. You got 40-34. I'm 35-30. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think Texas is going to win this one off the deep ball and find a way to get some nice attacks with Xavier Worthy. This is a fun matchup. It's exciting to have this game at noon on ABC. I'm super excited for this one.
Yep, no doubt. A lot on the line as well, and maybe a precursor to a potential playoff, berth later in the year in the Big 12 title game. That's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. As always, appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely looking forward to this one.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.